Welcome back to another Sunday video. I'm Chris.
I'm Aaron, and today we're doing part 1 of our electrical system upgrade, Battle-Born batteries.
What are you doing in here?
I'm making battery cables, I swear.
If you're new to our channel, we live and work full-time in our Airstream Interstate. We've been living in this for 15 months now, and we absolutely love it. And our goal for this year, 2020, is to live off-grid, fully contained, without any hookups or any resources for at least 1 week.
Yeah, and at the heart of that initiative is going to be our electrical system upgrade. And after years of research, we decided to partner with Battle-Born batteries to accomplish this goal.
So fast forward a good year into us living full-time, and we were able to meet a lot of friends, talk to a lot of full-time RVers on the road, and a lot of them have Battle-Born batteries on their RV, and they love them. So it's the best way to really do your research and find out from people that have the system, use the system, and love it, where you can trust their input. And then secondly, we've been lucky to meet many of the Battle-Born employees. The first time we were able to meet them was at the big tent RV show in Quartzsite, where we were able to meet Jesse and Ronnie and their team.
Yeah, and I even got to go on an install with Ronnie and watch him put in 2 Battle-Born batteries on a new Winnebago View. So I got to learn a little bit hanging out with him, and it was just a great experience. The second time we ran into the team members of Battle-Born batteries, it was actually the CEO and COO, Sean and Dennis, and that was at Dometic in the Desert. And just being able to talk with the co-owners, the co-founders of the business, I mean, it's just amazing. And they do so much in the full-time RV community. They're popping up everywhere and showing up at these events that we're all participating in. So stay tuned for our upcoming videos where we put this system to the test and do a full review on it. This video here is just going to be the install portion, and I think we're going to do it in a few different steps because it is a pretty big job. So we're just going to do the batteries today, and we'll quick go over our current system, and then we'll show you what we're upgrading to, and then we'll get right into this install. Also, I am not a professional. Are you a professional?
No.
I was actually banking on her to be the professional in this situation. So this is more just how to see we are putting this system into our van and to give you guys a good idea and maybe give you some thoughts to do your own research and put your own system in. It is pretty complicated to do this, but thankfully in today's day and age, with the internet and all the information that's on our fingertips, we can do a whole lot without being professionals. So everybody be careful out there, and let's get this thing started. The battery bank of this system is going to consist of 4 of these GC2 Battle-Born batteries, and these are kind of the golf cart replacement. They also make Group 31 larger batteries, but we feel these golf cart batteries will fit a little bit better in our van. On the inverter side, we decided to go with the Victron Energy MultiPlus 3000 watt charger inverter. So it's a 120 amp charger when hooked up into shore power, and then it's also a 3000 watt inverter. We're going to use that with the Bluetooth dongle so that we can control it separately from our phone. Also from Victron Energy, we decided to go with the Bluetooth monitor and shunt. You'll see a lot of these out there, and there's a reason why everybody goes with them. They're just the best. I picked up a Blue Sea battery cutoff switch, a lithium battery isolator. So this is for the van, and when the alternator charges, it will cycle on and off the alternator so that it doesn't burn it out. Picked up a couple battery bus bars, positive and negative, a 400 amp ANL fuse, and everything to make the battery cables. So we went with 4/0 bulk battery cable. We got 2 packages of 5 feet. Hopefully I don't need to use it all, but I did it that way just because I'm not sure how long these cables are going to need to be To cut it, we picked up a 4-gauge battery cable cutter. And this guy here is the crimper. So it's not hydraulic, but it's a dieless, and it goes up to 4/0. So neither one of us has ever made battery cables before, so this should be pretty interesting. And last, 4/0 battery cable lugs with 5/16 hole. The bulk of our system we purchased from Battleborn Batteries at a discount, and the rest we purchased from Amazon. We'll put all the affiliate links down below in the description if you want to see exactly what we used. So our current setup that we're upgrading from, we have 300 watts of solar up on the roof. We have 300 amp hours of Lifeline AGM batteries, which we already upgraded once, and a 1,000 watt Magnum inverter. We find the system only gives us 2 or 3 days of off-grid usage, which is nowhere near what we need or want. So our first step is to cut all power. We have the shore power we need to cut, the 12 volt power inside the coach, and then also, because we're in a van, we have power from the chassis battery, so we need to disconnect that also. Move the tortilla shells out of the way. That's the power to the Mercedes chassis. This is the second time I've forgotten this. So before shutting off the power, we need to remove the back of the sofa and move the power sofa forward so that we can get better access to the batteries. So now we're gonna reconnect the power quick, move the sofa, and then we'll get back to this. All right, 13 millimeter socket. We'll take the back of this sofa off nice and quick. All right, much better. At first, I wanted to put the 4 new Battleborn batteries right here underneath the sofa. Those 4 GC2s fit perfectly right there. And then I got to thinking more about the electronics and where the inverter has to go and hooking this up, and I think it might be a better fit where the batteries are right now. So we're going to take those out, and then we're going to play around and see what is the best placement for these new batteries. All right, the old batteries are fully disconnected and we're ready to remove them. These things weigh about 90 pounds a piece, so one of the great things about the new Battleborn batteries are the fact that they're 30 pounds a piece, so they're a lot easier to move around. Chris, you gonna help me with this?
Heck yeah.
90 pounds, so be careful with these.
You just pull them like this.
Yeah, just be careful.
Careful. I got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
It can get kind of complicated with a van because we have cables coming from the alternator up front. We have battery cables from the generator underneath. So we have a lot of wires, and these systems are quite complicated. So I have been trying to study up and learn as much as possible so that I can do this system safely, cleanly, and most importantly, so that it works. You can see part of the floor is missing back here, and that's where that battery box was that came factory from Airstream. So that was another surprise when we were upgrading the batteries the first time. We took that out and there's no floor under there. So we kind of used some wood and a battery tray just to kind of make a subfloor. So I'm going to clear up these wires a little bit, get rid of some of the ones we don't need, and then we'll start moving around the Battleborns and see where they fit best. The first thing I'm going to try, which hopefully works, is we'll reuse the battery tray as the floor. I'll screw this in, mount it, and then we'll put 2 of the batteries there and 2 of the batteries there. And I think that might be the best option. We would then put the inverter out here. I think this is going to be the best bet. It fits nice in this space. It'll kind of tuck the cables back out of the way so that they're not facing forward or up, and all the rest of the hookups and the wiring goes right inside here. So it'll make all the runs nice and short. The only other spot these batteries would fit would be right underneath the sofa, and they do fit there perfectly, 4 of them. And that would be a good option. The inverter would then go on this side, but I just feel like all the electrical connections are this way, and this just might be a little bit cleaner of a setup. Okay, now that we have that figured out, let's start planning out our wiring and see exactly how that's gonna fit. Most of the time people have this pre-done, but when you're not building it from scratch and not like a DIY van build, and you're integrating it into a new system by taking one out and putting one in, it's really hard to know exactly what it's gonna do or what it's gonna look like before taking the old one out. Okay, I secured the wood flooring with a couple screws, and I'm happy with how that's gonna sit with the battery tray. And I think the next step is we need to make those battery cables. So I'm gonna grab Chris and she's gonna help me make some cables.
Calling in the professional.
So I've never used this crimper before, but it should be pretty straightforward. It just has a little marker gauge right on it where you can adjust the crimping mechanism there. And so we're gonna move this all the way out to 4/0. We're getting pretty technical here.
But do we make an effective team? Yeah, right there.
Ooh, these things cut like butter. Nice.
So cool. You might get me into batteries after all.
Well, we have the jumpers completed for the battery cables to make these 4 batteries a battery bank. And I would say the cutter, the crimper, the flexible 4-gauge, the lugs, that all worked really well. The heat shrink, I think we maybe bought too big of a size. I read that it'd be 1 inch for 4-gauge, or 4/0, excuse me, 1 inch heat shrink. And it just seemed like it was a little bit too big, so it was kind of hard to melt it. And I didn't have a heat gun, so we are not gonna win any awards for our battery cables. They do not look pretty, but they will function well. We ran out of daylight yesterday, and that pushed us into a second day on the install on these batteries. You can see that they're in a different configuration than what we were looking at yesterday. So if anybody was cringing earlier in this video on how we were gonna set them up as far as how tight those connections were gonna be, you were right. It was very difficult to get the connections made back there. That's kind of part of working on a van. Every little space is smaller. So I ended up putting the connections up top, which was just a lot easier to connect them, and I'll just have to have some type of cover over top to help protect that and make sure we don't have any shorts. So make sure you be very careful while hooking up batteries. This is my first time hooking up 4 batteries like that. I've done singles and duals, but I've never had so many connections like that. It's not difficult, it's just you have to be very, very careful because you have so many wires and cables. And when they were in that first tight configuration, it was just extremely difficult. So now that we have those hooked up, I even tested it. We now have a 400 amp hour battery bank of Battleborn lithium iron phosphate batteries, and they were coming in at 13, almost 13.4 volts, I think it was. So I'm absolutely digging this so far. It's a lot of work, but it's coming together pretty good. And now we're gonna move on to our wiring. Here's the original battery isolation monitor right here. And here's the new one. You can kind of see the difference. Here's a quick note on the new BIM.
you can see on the old one, there are 4 small leads: ignition, ground, dash switch, and genset. And on the new one, you just have signal, which was the dash switch, the ground, and the ignition, but no genset. So I called up Precision Circuits and just asked them about that. And they basically said that the newer ones are smart enough to handle that, and you don't need to have this extra switch. So I guess on these previous ones, if the vehicle was running and the generator was running at the same time, it would cut off, I think, charging to the battery is what he said. So basically you just don't need that. And that's gonna give us a little bit more space in there, but you can still see how tight this is. This is our original Magnum Energy 1000 watt inverter, which we're gonna replace with that Victron 3000 watt, and that's so big that it has to go on the outside of this box and not tucked inside like this one was. Without doing a complete from scratch build, this makes it a little bit more difficult because you got to deal with your current components and then also your spacing issues. So it's not like just having a blank slate and drawing it all up. And then everything else in here we'll just go over so you can see what we're working with. This is the back side of the cutoff switch. Right next to that is the positive bus bar. And this large black box here is our DC and our AC distribution box, or breaker box and fuse box. On this side is what I already had in here, the Victron MPPT Bluetooth smart solar. So, and just as a quick note on that solar charge controller, you can see I have smaller 12 gauge wire, and that's because my solar panels are hooked up in series and not parallel. So there's only 20 amps that's running down through that. So it puts out 60 volts, my 300 watt panels do, and then it only puts out 20 amps. So you're allowed to have smaller wires. And so I'd like to eventually redo that, but I was just using the factory wire system. So let's clean this up a little bit and try to make some room for the new components. Here we are at day number 3, and boy, I gotta give it to those professional installers. This is not an easy job, so shout out to those guys, but I'm learning a lot and I'm having a lot of fun doing it at my pace. So one of the big problems with doing it in a van we're living in, is everything has to be loaded back in at night and unloaded during the day. So, and also unhooked in the morning and then rehooked back up. So I'm spending about an hour before and an hour or so after just disconnecting, connecting, and then also cleaning up all the tools. And everything has to come back inside, and our bed has to be made. So that is one of the hard parts of doing this while living in it. It's not something I can just cut off, go into the house, and then start back up the next day. But having fun doing this. Yesterday we did a lot of the positive wiring. We're still trying to figure out the best way to position everything. You kind of got to be flexible with this system because we're replacing an original and trying to make the new one mash together. So there's not a lot of space inside there for all the cabling, especially that big 4-aught, and that really helps to have the flexible stuff. So yesterday we got the main 400 amp fuse hooked up. We got the disconnect, which I decided to go with the original one because the new one was just too large to fit into that space. And we also have the positive bus bar hooked up and all the wiring. So we had to make some new cables to rearrange the batteries, and things are going together pretty good. It's a little tight in there, but we're going at our pace and learning as we go. So I'm gonna walk you through what we have, starting excuse me, with the battery bank. So that's all 400 amp hours hooked up in parallel. This will be our positive lead going out and our negative lead going out. And if we flip over to this side, this will be the main positive going to the battery bank. And you see, if we can follow that up right to the 400 amp fuse, and I know you can see how tight this corner is, but I really had nowhere else to kind of put all this stuff. And once you start piecing it together, it's just a maze. I wanted to do the fancy Instagram looking beautiful install, which I think I did a pretty decent job, but there's just no way to not cram all this 4-aught in here. So anyways, the 400 amp fuse from the battery bank goes to the battery cutoff switch with 4-aught. And from the battery cutoff, you'll see this L-shaped, see if I can get in there, this L-shaped kind of bar, which is just 4-aught cabling, which we had for our original batteries we were gonna make for a tight connection. We ended up not going that route, but it fit perfect to connect back to the positive bus bar, which I know is hard to see back there, but here's the positive bus bar, and we have our leads going off to that. This goes to the 12 volt in the distribution block here. And let's see, next up we have our lead that goes to our battery isolation monitor. Down here, the lithium version, the LI-BIM 225, and that last connection on top is going to go to our inverter. Right now it's hooked up to the Magnum, but back to the lithium battery isolation monitor. You can see the chassis battery comes up out of that, follows the battery cable all the way back to the chassis battery. And then it has the small leads, the ignition, ground, and signal. Also off the positive bus bar, there's the original Airstream circuit breaker bar, which has the radio, the lounge, and tank heaters, and a couple other accessories. But that is kind of the overview of the positive side. All right, the end has never been closer. We are on to the negative side. Let's take a look at what we have going on. If we take a look at what comes with this BMV 712, here is the shunt itself, which should be the first thing off the battery bank. So we'll put that somewhere along those lines. And looks like they give you 2 power cables, because you can hook this up to monitor 2 different banks. So we'll just be using one of those. Here's the cable for the remote monitor itself, which looks like that. So since this is Bluetooth, you don't have to set this up if you don't want to. Some people even leave this back hidden underneath wherever the batteries are hooked up, and then just use their phone. So we'll kind of take a look and see how far we get, and if I want to mount this up into our cabinet, which is right up top there. So it's really not too far to string it up there. So I decided to move the battery shunt to the back wall here and just hook up all my negatives back there. Part of the problem with running a negative off of here and down, it's going to hit this bracket as the sofa moves. So I already have that problem with the positive, which I haven't figured out yet. So I guess it's going to make more sense just to get that on the back out of the way. So hooking this thing up is pretty straightforward from what I've seen. The battery goes on this side from the negative, and all of your loads go on this side. So your inverter or your negative bus bar or all your negative loads go onto this side. And then this little tab right here presses down the orange button, and B1 is bank 1. That's where the power is going to go into. If you had a second bank you're hooking up to monitor, it'd be into B2. So let's get this thing drilled in and mounted up. So that was my final connection. I just hooked it all back up. We have successful DC power. Looks like everything went pretty smoothly. It still takes a ton of time to get all this stuff wired. You can see I did not put the negative bus bar. I just decided to go into the back since I only had a few of those DC connections, or excuse me, the negative connections. But those were a pain to get in the back, and Airstream uses a lot of this pure copper ground wire. There's the inverter has it on it, the generator, and this one goes to the fuse panel breaker box, so it's kind of a pain in the butt to use that. So I still got to do a little bit of modification, but as of now the batteries are in, all of the wiring is in, the Bluetooth monitor for the batteries is in, and all we have left to do is the inverter. And I just plugged in this monitor, but I don't have a way to charge these Battleborn batteries as of yet. My current Magnum inverter, the 1000 watt, I don't think has a setting for lithium. I know the larger Magnums do, but I looked a little bit last night and I couldn't seem to find one on the settings. It just has 2 AGMs and a lead acid. So it did not charge the batteries as we had it hooked up last night, but not a big deal because the new inverter is going in tomorrow. So we'll just wait to set that up, and then also wait to set up this Victron Bluetooth battery monitor. Also, I just want to make sure it was hooked up correctly and working. I know it takes like a cycle to recharge the batteries fully and then even drain them down and then back up, just to get that to go through a cycle to kind of set. That is kind of wrapped up. I still need to figure out a good way to mount these batteries down with some cleats or straps. There is a battery box on the back 2 batteries, or a battery tray. I may get another battery tray here so that we could put straps over them to hold them down, and then just put cleats to hold these down in place. We have, so it says 100% state of charge, which is obviously not accurate, but what should be accurate is the voltage, the current draw that's coming out right now, watts, amp hours consumed, and that time remaining is not accurate, I don't believe. This is what's super interesting, because I've never had a monitor like this with this shunt, so we were just going off of voltage the whole time. We never had an actual current or power draw coming off. So 1.6 amps is being drawn, and that's really, nothing's on. I don't really have anything turned on right now. So this will be fun to play around with, but it looks like it's an easy setup. There's not much to these, and I'm kind of excited to have this plus the MPPT smart solar controller, and then also the Victron inverter all together on one app. So pretty stoked about that, and can't wait to get that installed.
Well, the sun is setting once again on day number 3, but on this day it's actually all hooked up and completely done, mostly. So what did you think of the battery install?
A lot of appreciation towards people who do this regularly, and to you for learning all of this. I really didn't contribute anything to the research and the grueling brain power behind it. I know it's been pretty, stressful just to make sure you take all the right steps and don't rush it.
Yeah, you don't want to like make a major mistake.
So I got to appreciate watching you do that, and from afar you just see what really goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it.
I think we'll end this first part of the battery install now, and then the next step we'll get into the inverter hookup and then also setting up that Bluetooth battery monitor. It's hooked up right now, but it's not fully set up. That's going to take a little bit. Maybe I'll mess with that tomorrow. But also stay tuned for our upcoming boondocking adventures as we put this system to the test and make sure we can stay out off-grid comfortable for a week or more.
Yes, I look forward to testing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you next time.
Feel accomplished?
Right.